overly connected either. We don't want to lose ourselves. And so there's a certain amount of anxiety finding that balance. And then we did this exercise that absolutely made that tension tangible for me. And that wasn't the point of the exercise at all. It was part of a worship service. But it completely drove home for me that balance. The leader of the worship service had this whole room full of people. How many people were in that room? 60 people? Maybe 60 people. Had us all stand and each side face in, so we were each half of the room facing the other half, and chant the sacred syllable Om on whatever tone was comfortable for us, so it was this wonderful hive of sound. And we were invited to continue chanting for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a long time, especially if you're not used to just standing there chanting Om for long periods of time. And after a while, I noticed a really interesting phenomenon. I could feel the vibration in my chest of the sound I was making, but the longer I held the O of that note, the harder it became to distinguish my voice from the other voices, until at last I did not know where my voice, my sound ended, and the sound of the group began. And then just when I was beginning to find that almost a little bit scary, as if I was getting lost, I would have to finish the syllable so that I could take a breath. So I'd be going, oh, and I would be lost in this sound. And then eventually I would go, Om, Om. And each time I closed the syllable, took a breath, and began again, I reconnected with the individual self and sound. It's hard to describe it, but it, for me, has become a metaphor for the way we're always moving between our individual identity and needs and our sense of connection and the needs of the group. If we get too connected, we get lost in each other. And as I said, I got a little nervous when I couldn't identify my own voice. Claiming my own voice, as you may know, has never been something I find difficult. And yet it was so powerful to become part of such a deep and satisfying whole, to enter into that sound and be part of it. In order to belong, we need to become part of. Not to lose ourself, but to allow that self to be changed and shaped by our experience with the whole. To sometimes set aside the particulars of self and our own needs, to think about the well-being of the group, with the understanding that other people are also watching that balance and sometimes setting aside the particulars of their own need. At a previous Leadership Institute, the metaphor that one of the worship leaders used when she was talking about using different styles of music at different services. And you know, maybe some of you hate solo classical guitar, and you just wish Jim never played. Of course it's not. Of course it's not true, we all love it, but I'm using this, no, sit down, Jim. I'm using this as an example. People have different styles that they feel instinctively drawn toward, different kinds of music that make them feel most at home. For some it may be classical, for some it might be gospel, for some it might be pop, for some it might be jazz. Each Sunday, as the styles of music change, some of you will feel more comfortable and some of you may feel a little less comfortable. The point is that if this week isn't your style, next week might be. But for now, if it's not to your taste, the way our leader put it was, be thankful that someone else in the family is being fed. I love that as an image for community. We're never all being fed at the same time because all of our needs and preferences are different. But if we're sensitive to those needs and preferences, then we're all fed some of the time, and all of the time some of us are being fed. And when it's not suiting us, we can look with gratitude at the blissful look on the face of the person next to us and say, okay, this is her week. And I can celebrate that. Then I want to say one more thing. Because once we find our place to belong, and we cultivate that balance that allows us to feel that we are truly part of the fabric of our community, then our responsibility becomes making sure that the fabric of that community is loose enough, I'm getting into messy metaphors here, but that we can create a community that makes it easy for other people to come in and feel that sense of belonging also. And they may be people who aren't just like us. So we have to be conscious all the time about what kind of language we're using, what kind of assumptions we're making. Do we assume that everybody here will have heard something on NPR yesterday? Of course. This is the classic UU stereotype, and yet not all Unitarian Universalists listen to NPR. Some of us watch Fox News. Some of us listen to KYW News Radio or 1210 The Big Talker, and not only when the Phillies game is on. Some of us aren't even Phillies fans. Hard to imagine, I know. How about those Phils? We can't always assume that if the congregation sponsors an outing that costs a lot of money to go on, that everyone will feel welcome to take part in that outing. We can't always assume that everyone is comfortable navigating the intricacies of the internet, especially when you get into some of the higher technological aspects. We need to be mindful all the time of what we're doing and saying, and whether it creates a climate that allows people to come in easily and connect, or whether we're, without even realizing it, raising barriers that shut people out and keep them from ever having the chance to start building that sense of belonging with us. So I lift up two requests to you this morning. One is that we continue that hard and joyful work of being the kind of community where we can all truly belong, where our own needs and the needs of the group are held in a constant creative balance. And then that we keep working consciously and intentionally on being the kind of community where many different kinds of people can enter in and feel that same sense of welcome and belonging, and help us to keep that creative balance together.